welcome back to JB Reviews. I did a review on this 2018 Ram 3500. It's a long bed. It's not a dually, but single rear wheel. And this truck has 85,000 miles on it. Now, should you buy a used Ram 3500 with a Cummins? This truck has a 68 RV, and if you listen to any hate online, everyone's going to tell you to run away from this transmission, but that's just not true. Now let's go ahead and discuss this truck. If you are in the market for a truck that can tow 15,000 pounds in that ballpark, then this is the perfect truck for you. I wouldn't say much more than that because you could run into some payload issues depending on what you're towing. But yeah, gooseneck trailers, you should be fine. But this Cummins, in my opinion, is probably one of the last great ones. And let's go ahead and discuss that. Number one, the exhaust brake. Now, I'm going to turn it on to the full exhaust brake. Now, you ready for this? I'm going to take my foot off the gas right now. You guys hear that? Now, if I were to manually shift this truck, it gets a little bit stronger. Wow. Now, I actually did test a 2015 Ford F350. That truck did have a 6-speed transmission. I did note that the exhaust brake worked pretty well, but there's something about these older Cummins. You can hear that exhaust brake so much better in these pre-2019s, because in 2019 they did do some updates to the Cummins, and I think that the engine overall got a lot quieter. So even on the outside of this truck, it's a lot louder compared to the newer ones. And I think it's because of the hydraulic latch adjusters. This truck, on the interior, you don't really hear that Cummins as much. But you can hear that exhaust brake every time, and it comes on every time. One more time for you guys. Every time, it's strong. And the 68 RV did get some updates in 2019, and I felt like it got a lot more responsive, and I felt like it just got a little bit stronger. I think they increased the power, well, not power, they increased the strength of the torque converter is what they did basically, compared to the 68 RV in this truck here. And I mean, just cruising right along on the highway, I mean, this truck, it performs extremely well. These mirrors, they're not my favorite, you know, don't get me wrong, because they're not powered. Now they do power fold, but you can't get the power for the convex on this model year, nor putting them in tow mode. Now currently I am in stop and go traffic, right? So let's go ahead and see how hot we can get this truck. So right now currently the coolant is at 204, the transmission is at 183, and then the oil temperature is at 213. So I mean, that 68 RV normally does run a little bit cooler than that. If I were running at a consistent speed, it probably would drop down into like the mid 170s. But I remember that transmission running about 169, 173 in that ballpark. But in stop and go traffic, it is going to get warmer. Now that's something else to consider. You're supposed to change the fluid in the transmission every 60,000 miles. That might be something I would probably consider doing up front now too. And again, dealers doing it for you means you can get it at their cost. So they get the maintenance done. Sometimes dealerships won't do it for you, but if you say please, they might. And so that's really the biggest maintenance items. Now as far as oil changes go, they did do the oil change when they traded this truck in, so that was done. And for the most part, like, I had the cooled seats on the way to my destination here. I drove this truck down to the Larry H. Miller Ford store to get some videos, and I wanted to just kind of get an idea of the fuel economy. So this is like a, you know, kind of a real world fuel economy right here. So we're doing about 23 miles driven so far, about 40 minutes. I did drive a little bit in the city, and now we're back on the highway doing stop and go. So at the end of this, we'll kind of see how this truck ends off. Now, in case you guys are wondering about the numbers, the gross axle weight rating out front is going to be 6,000. The rear is 7,000 with a 12.3 gross fuel weight rating. And then payload, it's right here, 4,338 pounds. So that's not too bad for a truck like this. And if you get a long bed or mega cab, you get that 12.3 GVWR. Or if you get the crew cab like this with just a standard bed, it'll be 11.8. Now, one thing I will mention in this video is I don't know if I would buy a deleted truck, because typically when guys delete their pickup trucks, they like to run higher horsepower and higher torque tunes. This truck is completely stock, so if I was looking for a truck to do some heavy lifting or do some cross-country towing, anything like that, I would skip trucks that have been deleted. I mean, I would like to have a truck that's deleted, but if I don't know the guy who had it before me, odds are they might have hot rodded the truck, and I don't want a truck like that. And if I were to delete a truck, I probably wouldn't add that much more horsepower and torque. I would go into the lowest setting to keep the truck as close to stock as possible, because I don't really care for a performance truck. I really want the truck to be able to be reliable, and that's something that you have to consider, you know, if you're looking for a used truck. Like, I think that this is the best buy because there's less moving parts inside the Cummins. And these trucks are a little bit better to work on by yourself. Like, I will say, the fuel filters in this truck are hard. It's not hard, it's just, it's time consuming and it's really tight. So you have to be really careful. Everything's plastic, obviously, so you have to be sure not to break anything. And let's go ahead and check out what the 0 to 60 is on this truck. You guys ready for that? Let's go ahead and check it out. This truck has 85,000 miles. It's 5 years old. Let's see how it does 5 years later. Unfortunately, the video did get deleted, but I was able to get some of the numbers. So here they are right here. And be sure to stay to the end for the MPG for this test. Now, something that I noticed on this truck, the passenger seat does not shake. My 2018, it had the 20-inch wheels on it, and the passenger seat did shake a good bit. Now, I did have the Firestone tires at the time. This has Cooper Discoverers, and they're pretty brand new tires too. And I would say they're quiet as well. But yeah, the AC inside this truck is great. And the leather seats are still nice and plush. I do have the cool seats on. And yeah, I'm actually getting a little chilly. There's only 2 settings for them. And then check out the performance. I'm gonna accelerate a little bit. I mean, this truck, it is really solid. And if you're looking for something, even if it's just to tow a couple times a year, this having the long bed, this is perfect for a fifth wheel. And whoever owned this truck, look at this. Here's the Trip. Is it the Trip B? 85,000 miles. And they were averaging 8.1 MPG. So they were towing pretty consistently with this truck. Because right now I'm getting about 16.2, you know, 16.3 now, stop and go traffic, driving in the city, and we're getting double that right now. So whoever owned this truck was doing some heavy lifting. So here it is. Hopefully you guys can hear the engine. It is pretty healthy. And as I mentioned, this truck does have the Cooper tires, so it's the Cooper Discover ATPs. And then here's the tire size, 275, 70, 18. And then out back, here's the leaf setup. This truck does ride a little bit stiffer than the newer trucks do. Back then there was an air suspension option as well. And I don't think that the air suspension really helped the ride. But on the newer trucks, I know there is a little bit of a difference on how these trucks perform on the road. Now, something else to consider if you're looking at a used truck is driving the city. One thing I noticed on a Ford F-250 that I tested, the doors seemed a little loose. Like every time I would hit bumps, the doors would like flap, and you can kind of, I guess, hear the weather stripping on the doors flapping. I don't notice that on this truck. Now this truck is obviously 3 years newer than that Ford was, so that could be something to consider. Now this truck does have about the same amount of miles on it though. But all in all, I think that if you're looking for a reliable pickup truck, you're gonna find that in this Ram 3500. I think it's a solid truck. I mean, apart from the mileage, I mean, sometimes the mileage doesn't really mean anything. If you take care of it, and if you run a little bit of fuel additive, which you don't really need to do in this truck because it has a CP3, although I always recommend adding a little something to it, you know, to keep the fuel system lubricated and running at its peak. I always recommend that. So we're pretty much done here. And here's where we end off with the fuel economy. That's almost 30 miles, 16 and a half. That is pretty good. Pretty good. Now, again, that's with some city driving. That's with a little bit of stop and go. So yeah, I definitely recommend this truck.